Everybody, thanks for watching. And just a quick update before we get into this video. People who order books, tracking numbers have started going out. So if you don't get one by Friday, make sure you send me an email, but you should have a tracking number by Friday, everybody. But they're going out. It's a lot of books to ship out. So please, be patient. I appreciate it. But if you don't get a tracking number by Friday and you ordered the book, make sure you send me an email at therealmerkabah@gmail.com so it can get taken care of. But we're not going to forget anybody. And we got you guys. I appreciate the support and the patience. So they start going out. Also, like I said, the book would sell out fast. So books are sold out, except for the Self-Inflicted Religious Deception Volume 2. There's a few more of those books left, but they will sell out. So we'll get those back up once we can. But, it's a process. But appreciate everybody who supported and got the book early. As I said, it will go quick. Also, never paid a membership. Like, I don't understand what's up with the link. I know a lot of people were having problems with it. We left it up. It's still up there. So if you have a problem with the link, send us an email. But the Never Pay Again membership is still there. The link works. You got a shot, but it's going to be gone by Monday. But it should still be up. The issue with the app for Apple, it's in-app purchases. Apple has their own process when it comes to people buying stuff on the app. They control all of that shit. So we have no control over what is purchased or how things are done with purchasing with Apple. So, if you have an iPhone, you have in-app purchases. They control that whole system. They want to be in control of it. This is why, we've been having an issue with them as far as them having control over purchases. They don't want any links or anything within an app, an iPhone app, going to any outside, merchants, merchants like PayPal or what have you. They want to deal with those people on their own instead of you dealing with them on your own behalf. They want to be a part of it. It's a weird thing. So it's not really so much of an issue. It's just time consuming because everything now has to be uploaded in, Apple development, and your Apple developer's account, and every single thing that you sell has to be listed with them and has to go through them. So every digital download or whatever you want to sell, t-shirt or what have you, has to go through them. T-shirts, a lot of people ask about t-shirts and stuff like that. There's an entire site there for you guys to go and check out to get t-shirts and socks and all kinds of stuff there. There's going to be more stuff added to that site. But if you want to get t-shirts, what have you, merch, then it's there. Also, once we finish the site, which is why you haven't seen the shop button on Merkabah Academy yet, because we're going through that, it will pop back up. But the link to that shop is in the description if you want to go there and get shirts or what have you. Appreciate the support. So yeah, just a couple of little kinks to iron out with the situation, but we're doing it. As the stuff we had issues with Apple before is taken care of. It's just, this meticulous part, and the app will be out. Like I said, the anal, and this is the process. Like, it's weird. Haven't been through it before, and you got to make it right. Anything that's, this detailed. So, going to release the app. And as I said, a lot more stuff as well. Appreciate the patience and support, but it's looking good. And yeah, let's get into this video. So, we got to look at the Bible, look at history as I always do, and see what took place. It's one of the things that's going to help us understand a lot of the current events and things to come, and why things are, the way they is and are in place the way they are. Talked about Joe Biden becoming president, becoming the first Jewish president, and how a collapse or anything involving money would be likely in his terms, if he has two. You see they're trying to push Trump ahead and, come back out with the Trump stuff. So we'll see what happens with that whole thing. But we got to remember, we have the Jews, and we got to remember that the Bible was telling them, I am the Lord, your God. I'm the God of Israel, and what that entails. So very first commandment, God says, you shall have no other gods before me. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, implying that there are other gods, that, it's such a thing. So we have to think about that and think about, why would that even be said? Why is that something to say at all to them? And understand, again, of course, this is a story and it's esoteric, but for the reader, you need to grasp and understand, why is this being said? What is that about? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And I broke down the whole thing about the bull. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai, they was worshiping the bull calf, which is basically the old Aries constellation they were in, and they wasn't supposed to be worshiping that. They are in a new constellation. And I talked about how the Ark of the Covenant has to do with the zodiac and, just understanding that that means knowledge, that means the universe. And if you have this understanding, which is basically knowledge, you're going to be able to go out and conquer everybody else who don't really understand what you're using. So this is what they were using and how the Bible is trying to esoterically tell us what they were using. So when we look in the Bible, we see, it's the Israelites. The Israelites going out and conquering these nations. And I pointed this out as well, how, of course, the Israelites are the Greeks, and the Greeks are telling their story through the Bible using the Jews. So God is commanding them to go out and destroy these other nations. And this is what they go do. So we know in real life, this was the Greeks. We understand it was the Greeks. So when the Bible is talking about go out and conquer the Hivites and the Perizzites and the Jebusites and the Girgashites and what have you, it's talking about African kingdoms, African nations that existed. But we know this is, the Greeks. So just like we have with the conquest of the Jews beginning with Egypt, them coming out of Egypt and then getting the commandments, what have you, they go and conquer, dealing with Egypt. It's the same with the Greeks. They were in Egypt before the Persians came and conquered. And after they conquered the Persians in Egypt, they began their rule. We don't see nowhere, nobody, no other civilization doing what the powers that be did as far as Greek and Rome during the time the Egyptians were in power. It's only the Egyptians who had what they had and the knowledge they had. We don't see these other civilizations having it on the level the Egyptians had until after the fall of Egypt, as far as the Europeans. This is when we see it. So it's all going to make sense. So we have this. We have all these connections that tell us, 100% it's the Greeks, and all this creation of the Bible and what have you is coming from the Greeks. So, of course, we have the wars of the Diadochi, Hellenization. We have this conquering of African lands and African people. And then, what are the Jews doing in the Bible? Basically the same thing. So there's no other people who fit the description of what the Israelites are doing in the Bible better than the Greeks, period. And it's the time frame. Everything is lining up. It shouldn't be hard for anybody who's doing real research to grasp this. So when I'm talking about this and you have Black Hebrew Israelites having an issue with it, this is why, because they don't want to go and look and make that comparison. They're stuck and fixated on the Bible as being actual history when we all know it's not. You can't find any other people, just like how they can say, well, the Deuteronomy 28 fits Black people. Well, the conquest of the Israelites fits the Greeks. No Black civilization, no Black people we can find fits that conquest better than the white Greeks. But we got to look at this whole thing again. Why? So God says, I'm the Lord, your God, the God of Israel, the Lord, your God, specifically speaking to these specific people we call Jews. Everybody else is out there worshiping Moloch, the bull. And this, they understand. One, you go back ancient times, ancient Egypt, the ancient world, you're going to find Hathor, you're going to find Apis, you're going to find many civilizations that worship bulls, in that region. So they know later on when we go out and we see this stuff, we'll stay away from it. Like, hey, here's Moloch. This is what they was worshiping. That stuff they got away with back then. We're more intelligent now. We understand now. But you got to imagine when they're trying to establish all this whole thing, because we don't think about that. Just think about when they trying to put this stuff in place and they're trying to establish this religion and people not having this understanding. They're going out there and they're seeing the bull statues. They're seeing this stuff. They stand away from it. It's giving more validity to the religion, which is how it caught on, so fast. But again, as I said, you got to think about it. These people, even if you want to go in real life, they wouldn't have a notion of a God. How would they have a notion of a God if they've never seen one? So if it's such a thing as a God and they have a notion of it, then it must exist. It must be real. You're not going to sit there, especially back then, and worship something that you don't see has some type of actual power or attribute that's contributing to your life and helping you out. They wouldn't waste their time doing that. So this, worshiping other gods thing, it had to have been some validity to it. And just looking at it from a Bible standpoint and a common sense standpoint.
But we know, what the ancients were actually doing and worshiping these things. But they're trying to just use it so that when we find it later on, or when the people found it back then, they can say it was bad and this is what we were talking about. So again, even that whole story is esoteric to what the Greeks were trying to portray back then. So you're thinking about it, and God is saying, or is telling the Israelites, do not worship any other gods. Why? Because if they do, they're going to find out the truth. They're going to find out what's going on. It would be the same in real life. If the Greeks were to basically follow the old gods and what the Egyptians was following and understand that whole logic, they would know the truth and they will be swayed by it and it would follow them. They wouldn't follow the Greeks. And that's what it's about back then. You got to get these people to give up their life for you. What do you say to a people, to a person, to a man that's going to make them pick up a sword or a bow and run out on that battlefield and give his life for what? It's the same thing we see in today. Like, you got to really put something in a person to really get them, especially back then, to make the ultimate sacrifice and give up their life to go and fight for something they're never going to see come true, or go out there with the possibility they're going to die and leave behind their family and so on and so forth. So they had to make this stuff really real. And it was enough to do that back then for them to put in the heads of the people that this is something that you need to fight for and we need to go and conquer. But had these people went and followed what the Egyptians was following and understood deeply what was going on, they would have never followed the Greeks. They would have definitely stayed with the ancient Egyptians. And that's one of the rumors about Alexander and why he was, killed, because he began to understand that, hey, we need to be following this. This is something we need to listen to. And that's why they got him out of there and, split up everything. So now, after the fall of Kemet, after the Greeks came in and conquered the Persians, and I know we talked about this stuff before, but we got to get into this. There's a lot of people who haven't seen those videos, so it's going to make sense. After the fall of Kemet, by the hands of the Persians, via the Greeks, you might as well say, Greeks come in, they conquer the Persians, they establish themselves as the power structure of Egypt and basically take over the Egyptian empire eventually. So once this happens, they become the powers that be. They become the powers that be. And I talked about how, Rome comes along and they basically join with Rome. And whatever happened, something took place. Either they were always in cahoots or the Greeks explained to them what was going on. Because you have to remember, and I keep talking about this, you got to think about it. If you follow Roman history, these people had everything. They had what they needed already. They had the Caesars. They had might. They had a powerful military. For them to meet up, conquer the Greeks, but then continue Hellenization is big. It tells you something. They have to have already been in on it, or the Greeks told them something, or was following something, more powerful. And, eventually we get Islam, and it's the same thing. And we're going to get into this a little bit more, but you got to look at it. So they're hiding behind this story. But now with the creation of, the Persians first to do their dirty work, conquering Egypt, then we get the Arabs that come in and take care of the Persians, but also use them to basically hide behind as far as conquest. So now they can go around and preach this word and use the Arabs, as fear-mongering, the fearmonger. So now they're saying, oh, we got to deal with these Arabs and we got to watch out. It's the same thing that's happening today. This is how we know this is the same people. They're using this same weapon. So now you have the Arabs on the rise, going out conquering. You have them going. And the Persians and the Arabs been doing this for a long time. You go back and you start reading a lot of those ancient, those old books on history. This is what they had to deal with. It was a fear. How else you get people to come into your kingdom and follow your rules? Like I said, if you build a kingdom, you need people come in and do your work. You have to get them into the kingdom. If they're fine in their homes, you get somebody to go in and burn their home down. Burn their house down, now they got somewhere to go. Oh, come stay with us. And so on and so forth. So the people are scared of this. They're scared of a bunch of stuff. I labbed on the whole dragons thing. I don't get into that too much. But remember, we talked about in one of the Saturn and Satan videos how this whole dragon situation was going on, and how when you go and look at, those times, they talked about dragons and they talked about having to deal with dragons. And when you look at the, when they found the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, and those manuscripts is referencing dragons. And remember, they call Satan the dragon. And then in one of the excerpts with one of the scribes who found it, a long time ago, they was talking about, them possibly using, the dragon as this symbol, making the evil one or the Satan the dragon, because that's what people was fearing back then. It all makes sense. Sounds crazy, but it makes sense when you start really getting into why was Satan called this dragon or that old serpent, so on and so forth. But they're using, still to this day, the Arabs to hide behind. So they become the powers that be. They're in power. And you got to look at it. Judaism, this religion is created, and the Greeks are using it to get themselves out there, to get this story out there, because they was going to later come along and say, hey, we are the descendants of these people, of this Jewish bloodline that goes back to the Holy Father, or so on and so forth. But then Rome comes along and conquers. It's a power shift when you look at it. And then they say, no, we want this for us. So Christianity is created, and Judaism is sort of usurped, but it's still there. This is how you can see it's a combination of the two. Judaism, the Greek people; Christianity, Roman. You understand? So when you go back and look, remember, still, Delos, Greece, the oldest Jewish temple is there. And then you have the establishment of Christianity. We have Constantine, who so much surrounded him. Constantine really did exist. And then we have, the establishment of the papacy and all these rules and laws and the canon and so on and so forth, to begin this power structure of control, to where now you have the Christians, the Pope, controlling Judaism, and then later on when Islam is created, controlling them, and been using them since then to go out, first enslave us and go in our lands and conquer our lands. Remember, Rome and the Arabs came into Spain and took that from us. Same thing with all of Northern Africa, which is, mixed. Talk about it being the mixed population today. So all of this is coming together for you to understand the establishment of this powers that be and the origin and what they did to get where they are today. So you go back and you look at it, beginning with Egypt, that conquest of the Egyptian empire and the land we call Israel. But you also have to remember, the early Jews were black, plain and simple. They were black. They were black people. And those kingdoms, when you go and look, they hide all this stuff. They were black, the early Jews. So you have these black people going out and establishing this religion and getting it to where it's at. So that was just used. Understand what I'm saying? That was just used for them to get their foot in the door. So the black people who are, running these territories, get them to convert. They're Jews now. They're spreading this religion. Rome comes and conquers. Now we have to change it. It's a power shift. Remember, we talked about Rome being black people being there. It's a power shift now. Out with the Jews. It's a big deal. And then now we have Christianity. Now with the Jews, you can look and say, okay, these people are, the Jews, which would be black people. And then, they begin to mix in and so on and so forth. And we get to where we have Arabs and white people as far as Judaism. But with Christianity, it could be anybody. So as far as Jews, you will understand who those people are. But with Christianity now coming in, and this is important to understand because they use Christianity, even though they don't want to say it. They didn't want to say it then. They're saying it now. The Pope came out and admitted, and apologized for the Pope's or the Vatican's involvement in the slave trade. But bigger than that, you got to understand that the establishment of these kingdoms and them going out and doing the conquering was based on Christianity. They're not going to say it. They don't teach it in schools. They don't want to, say it that this is something that we should go back and look at and validate, because if we're doing all this conquering and we establish all this on Christianity, on the basis of Christianity, is Christianity true? And it's something that they don't touch on. But it says here, Christianity was one of the justifications that European powers used to colonize and exploit Africa through the dissemination of Christian doctrine. European nations such as Great Britain, France, and the Netherlands sought to educate and reform African culture. In his book, A History of Africa, scholar J.D. Fage describes the racially based logic of European intellectuals and missionaries, saying, Mid to late 19th century Europeans were generally convinced that their Christian, scientific, and industrial society was intrinsically far superior to anything that Africa had produced. Unfamiliar with the diverse cultures on the continent of Africa, European explorers viewed practices unfamiliar to them as lesser and savage. And this is what some people accepted as, being right and true because Europeans said so. It's like I said before, who defines sophistication? Who defines what's intelligent or sophisticated? And we go by what they interpret it to be. To many European nations, Christianity represented Western civilization and the basis for Anglo-Saxon morality. Christianity served as a major force in the partition and eventual colonization of Africa. During the late 19th century, European nations increasingly viewed the global power. In an attempt to augment political and regional influence, nations like Great Britain and France needed a justification for expansion. So if you're going to expand, and again, how do you convince people to go out and help you expand? Okay, you're going to pay people money for whatever, but how do you also convince these people that this is just a society that's supposed to be sophisticated? We need to go out and do this. Okay, well, let's go and take the savage land from these savages on the basis of Christianity, and that our ancestors, which they believe is theirs, went out and conquered and took land from people, tribes or what have you, who was doing the wrong thing, worshiping, devils and demons or what have you. So we're going to justify this by going to go take this land, but really it's under the guise of they want to expand. Essentially, Christianity was a guise by which Western governments justified the exploitation and conquest of African nations. In the poem, The White Man's Burden, poet Rudyard Kipling exclaims, "Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness ease." Originally denoted as a reference to United States imperialism in the Philippines, the Anglo-centric basis of the poem holds true to the root structure of imperialist ideology, denouncing the religious practices of Africans as witchcraft and heathenism. European nations sought to convert and then exploit the indigenous people of Africa. So when I showed you guys Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and them going out there and basically conquering these South African or South American places, these islands, Taino people, so on and so forth, this is what they was doing. Remember, they was putting them on a cross and burning them at the stake for not converting to Christianity, saying whatever they was doing was evil and wrong. It was crazy. And this is one of the things, if you remember, well, if you my age, I'm 40 now. If you remember, you go back. This is something that we talked about back in the day. We were saying that, African people are savages. This is stuff that we really believed until we start later seeing how developed Africa is and, what was taking place there. But we just thought they was running around butt naked with bones in their lip. I talk about that all the time. And, they were just evil. It's the same thing with voodoo. We talked about with Haiti and talked about in New Orleans, how this is voodoo, this is witchcraft. What they doing is evil. And, we got to stop them or we got to convert them to the good side. You understand? And this is real, true spirituality. And I talked about how when you go back and look, they wiped out, completely got rid of all of the old ways. So when they got rid of people using, alchemy, people using anything, that went back to the old ways, they just made it evil. They just said, demonism, witchcraft, so on and so forth, used it as justification to go into these lands and conquer and got people to accept that and follow them into conquest. So we got to understand this is long ago. This is stuff that happened that was in the minds of people who are long gone. And if it's not taught, it's not going to be passed down. And we know that history, knowledge is controlled by the conquerors, not the conquered. The conquered is dead and gone. The conquerors can now take over the civilization and put in place whatever history they want. And this is what happened. So we got to go and look and understand what took place. And I talked about this before in the many hidden accomplishments of African people on YouTube. So remember, we have today, we got the Moors, we got the Black Hebrew Israelites, both saying the same thing, that Europe was ruled by Black kings. Now, the Moors saying they were Moors, the Black Hebrews saying they were Hebrews. But the Moors is the ones that have more validity because we can find Moorish everything when you go and look. And they hide this well. But we know, Europe was black. It's ruled by black kingdoms. And they didn't understand. It's the same thing in Africa. They would never fathom that this would turn into a black-white thing. Today, it's like, oh no, we can see it. But see, back then, they were intermarrying, and there was a knowledge. They was able to understand. And it's something they could never fathom on a global scale, that this black-white thing would be a huge issue on the scale that it is. And it will go to basically set, your status and who you can be and what you can do based upon your color. So they control history now, the conquerors. So they can go erase everything and hide everything. So to us now, of course, Europe is white, to the layperson, anybody who does study and understand what took place. But it says here, Princess Sophie Charlotte was born on this date in 1744. She was the second Black Queen of England. Philippa of Hainault was the first Black Queen of England. Charlotte was the 8th child of the Prince of Nero, Germany, Charles Louis Frederick, and his wife, Elisabeth Albertina of Saxe-Hildburghausen. In 1752, when she was 8 years old, Sophie Charlotte's father died. As Princess of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, Sophie Charlotte was descended directly from an African branch of the Portuguese royal house. Margarita de Castro Yasosa. 6 different lines can be traced from Princess Sophie Charlotte back to the Margarita de Castro Yasosa. George I of Great Britain's grandmother was Elizabeth Stuart, the Winter Queen of Bohemia, and the daughter of James VI of Scotland and James I of England. This is King James we're talking about. And subsequently, Great Britain. George I was the grandfather of Charlotte's eventual husband, King George III. As a Protestant and a descendant of the Stuart kings, he was chosen to become king. The long lineage of Scottish kings and queens is often sidelined in the ancestry of the current royal family. She married George III of England on September 8, 1761, at the Chapel Royal in St. James Palace, London, at the age of 17 years of age, becoming the Queen of England and Ireland. The conditions of the marriage contract were the young princess join the Anglican Church and be married according to the Anglican rites, and never ever involve herself in politics. Although the Queen had an interest in what was happening in the world, especially the wars in America, she fulfilled her marital agreement. The royal couple had 15 children, 13 of whom survived to adulthood. Their 4th eldest son was Edward Augustus, Duke of Kent, later fathered Queen Victoria. Queen Charlotte made many contributions to Britain as it is today, though the evidence is not obvious or well publicized. Her African bloodline in the British royal family is not common knowledge. Portraits of the Queen have been reduced to fiction of a black magi until 2 art historians suggested that the defined African features of the painting derived from actual subjects, not the minds of painters. And this is something that the Black Hebrews been talking about for a minute, about King James being black. And then, you understand that, yeah, it's a possibility of this being true. But of course, when we look at everything that's been put in place to cover that up, it's hard for people to accept that. But when you start to dig more, and that's the whole thing that has to happen, you got to set aside the bias and dig deeper. And when you dig deeper, there's so many people that talked about this black royal family, who talked about black people ruling. And this is hidden so deep and it's covered up so well, but it's there. And it's going to make sense in a second when we get to this point. But there are others, you gotta look at it. We've been here first. We have to been ruling. We know we were sophisticated. We know we were advanced people. We taught them this stuff. They got it from us. So you have to look at it as us having these wars, these problems. Nobody wants war. Nobody wants to deal with these issues. The best way to get by it is a treaty. let's come together on the basis of religion. Okay, let's make peace by intermarrying. And that's how they got in. Another person, Elizabeth of Bohemia, the Protestant Negress Moorish Elizabeth Stuart, and I'm reading this straight from the book, so I just want to put the shot of the book here. Queen of Bohemia was the eldest daughter of James VI and the first of England. We know King James, and his dark-skinned Danish wife, Anne of Denmark. Now, I talked about this before, got dual citizenship in Sweden, and I talked about the Black royal family in Sweden and how the last Black royal member was the Black Queen, and they still celebrate her to this day. So there's validity to this because in Sweden, it's known. They know about the Black royal family. They know about Black people being there, and it's talked about. So Denmark used to be a part of Sweden. This used to be all same territory until they split up. But Denmark, it makes sense, especially since Denmark is, real close, right next to Sweden. So the Danish wife, Anne of Denmark, Elizabeth, who was also called Winter Queen, became Queen of Bohemia, Czech Republic, in AD after marrying the admirable black-skinned Frederick V. Elector Palatine or Palatine, a marriage that was politically arranged in order to strengthen an alliance between England and German Protestants. See, this is how they got in. Alliances, intermarrying. The Queen, with that typical Stuart color, upon giving birth to her first son, Prince Frederick Henry, happily described him to her father, King James of England, to be a petite little black baby, who favored his father's dark coloring. There were several other children of the Queen, such as Princess Elizabeth. Okay. The Protestant Negro Moorish King Charles Stuart I was the son of James IV, or James VI and the First, and his dark-skinned Danish wife Anne of Denmark, who we just talked about. Charles became ruler of England in AD 1625 following the death of his father. The king, who suffered from a severe speech impediment, married the dark-skinned Henrietta Maria, the daughter of the black-skinned Queen Marie de Medici of France. The couple had 7 children, with 3 sons and 3 daughters to survive infancy. In AD 1642, Charles fought a civil war, which years later he was defeated and captured. During his trial, he was found guilty and beheaded. His son Charles II continued the Stuart line in AD 1685. King Charles I is the 8th great-grand-uncle of Elizabeth II. Char, or Char of Charles, means darky, black, or nigger, or niger, the same as charcoal. So Charles means black. It's one of the things that they cite. Now, we talked about Saint Maurice in previous videos, being the black saint. Now, again, this gives so much more validity to everything when you understand we have this Saint Maurice who was so well known that it makes sense that, this, whole black people going around being the leaders and rulers and main pushers of the church in the beginning is true. Now, an article here I was reading about says, what were Black experiences in Europe like before the arrival of the transatlantic slave trade? How did medieval Europeans view the continent of Africa? And that's one of the things it's saying, what were their experiences like before the transatlantic slave trade, implying that we was there, like we was in Europe before that, because they want to say we just came straight from Africa. We was in Europe, we was ruling the shit. Where did the Black Saint Maurice and the Black Magus come from? Think about that. And why have they persisted into the present? Discover the travels and lives of Africans in German-speaking Europe as they interacted with painters, writers, emperors, and priests, often labeled as Moors. Many Black figures stood at the intersection between religion, Islamic Christianity, and culture, coming from exotic lands full of riches and the promises of new alliances. The Moor in the European imagination symbolized the ambition of Christian universalism and the expansion of European empires. And this is a newer article, and more stuff like this is going to start to come out as they try to bring us together. You understand that what it's saying. Okay, you go and look. St. Maurice is all over Germany. Plain and simple. We're talking about German-speaking Black people. You go to Germany, I've been there, and you see statues of the Moors. You see it. It's there. You see the Moors constantly talking about this. And you have to remember this. The whole thing with Meghan Merkel, when she married Prince Harry. Remember the whole big thing when the Princess of Kent wore the Moorish brooch, and everybody spazzed out and said, "Oh, it was racist. She was being racist." How was she being racist? She is showing you who they took the kingdom from, who was there first.